Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a terrarium for isopods, also known as roly-polies or pill bugs. It's a great project to do, especially in the winter time when you have the winter blues and it's cold and you can't really do too many fun things outside. It's a nice way to bring a little bit of nature into your home. So if you go into Amazon and type in plant terrarium, they have these in various sizes. These work really, really well. Or you can go into Amazon or go to the pet store and get a little reptile cage or reptile feeding bin. This is the one that I'm using. So in this video, I'll show you how to set up a terrarium for your isopods in this setup or in a plant terrarium. So you're going to want to make sure that you have something that has some ventilation, but not too much, because isopods do like it fairly humid. And you want to make sure that it's mesh screen or small holes so that way the baby isopods cannot escape. You can get some mesh window screen on Amazon as well and cut it to size for your terrarium. And we're going to start by making a drainage layer. You can then get horticultural grade clay beads, or you could get gravel. Rinse them off. This will help make a drainage system. And pour them into the bottom of your terrarium. Smooth them out so that there's an even layer across the bottom. And then take your screen and put it right on top. Now that we have our clay beads and our screen on for the drainage system, we're going to go ahead and add the substrate. For the substrate, you can do a mix of some different things. You can use some peat moss. This will help maintain humidity. Just make sure that any of the soils or the moss that you add doesn't have any additives to it, because you can get these soils in the garden center at the store or at the pet shop. But if you get it from the garden center, some soils do have fertilizer mixed in for the plants. So you want to make sure you get something that doesn't have any of that, because you don't want to harm the isopods. And when the isopods go to the bathroom, that will help fertilize the plants you add to the terrarium. So we got organic peat moss, Coast of Maine, substrate, and this is really nice because it has coconut in it, perlite, which will help with drainage, just a really little bit of it in here. Aged bark. Adding aged wood is really good to isopod enclosures. Earthworm castings, which I got some in the same brand as well, are also good. Fluker's coconut bedding is really good. We're going to add some sphagnum moss because that's really good for maintaining humidity. And isopods are technically crustaceans and they do have gills. So you want to make sure that you keep some of this in their enclosure at all times and keep it moist at all times, so that way they can gravitate over to it and get that moisture if they need it. But I'll go more into the care of isopods after we're done setting up the enclosure. You're also going to want to add leaf litter. You can buy leaf litter. This one came from the Bio Dude. Some people collect leaves out of their own yards and they'll either boil it or cook it to kill off any germs or any pests in it. But I've never tried doing it that way myself personally. So if you want to do it that way, do some research and look into that, because unfortunately I don't have advice to give for that because I bought this from the Bio Dude. This is another good mix that you can add into it, as well as some horticultural grade charcoal. Make sure it's horticultural. Since isopods like a pretty humid and somewhat damp environment, the charcoal really helps combat bacteria growth and smells. And when you're making a terrarium or a bioactive enclosure, you're going to want to add springtails to it as well, which are teeny tiny little bugs that help act as a cleanup crew similar to the isopods. And they help keep the soil clean, they help eat waste, they help eat mold, they help aerate the soil similar to isopods. And springtails really thrive and benefit when you have charcoal in the enclosure. You can get this from the garden center. You can get it from Walmart. You can even get it on Amazon. There's a lot of different places to find this. And as for the substrate itself as a whole for this terrarium, you can even go to certain places such as the Bio Dude. or Dirt Daddy, and you can buy substrate already made, but for this video, I'm teaching you how to make it from scratch. So we're going to mix all this up, and then we'll add some plants, we'll add some cork flats, I'll show you some supplies I got from Josh's Frogs to add to it. We'll decorate it, and then I will show you the isopods I got and teach you how to take care of them. So I'm doing pretty even mixes of the soils and coconut fiber. I'm going to do a sprinkling of the earthworm castings. I'm going to mix in a little bit of charcoal throughout the whole thing, crunch up some leaf litter to sprinkle across the whole thing because that also serves as a food source for the isopods, and then I'll put some sphagnum moss in the corner of each terrarium. And here's a scoop of the peat moss, and I'll mix it all together. Alright, let's add the charcoal. And the leaf litter. I'm crunching it up, but I'm going to leave some whole pieces in there too. Alright, I added the sphagnum moss, and I won't wet that until the isopods get here because they're not in here yet, so there's no use in wetting that down. Now I will show you what I got from Josh's Frogs to add to this. So here's some stuff I got from Josh's Frogs for the terrarium. I got some cork flats because isopods really love hiding under these. And this is food for the isopods. You can mix it with water and make it a gel, but I heard that some people also just feed it to them as a powder. I'll make this later on in the video and I'll show you how that goes. I got some mood moss to add some color and some life to the terrarium and to also help retain the humidity. And I got some live plants. Alright, so it's a few days later and the isopods have arrived in the mail. If you don't want to have anything shipped to you, you can see what kind of reptile expos are in your area and you can get isopods there. You can see there's a heat pack in here because it is winter, but it has been mild the past few days, which is why they were able to send these. The heat pack just gives them that little extra layer of protection. Oh, and I apologize if I sound really nasally. I'm getting over a pretty bad cold, so nothing I can do about my voice. So these are lotus pods. Isopods really like hiding inside of them, so I ordered a couple of these to put in the enclosures. So I got anemones, and I got Greek shields. So I'm going to look through here, make sure they're all alive, and then I'll get them both set up in their own enclosures. I'll let them settle in, and then I will update you and teach you some different care tips for them and go over some different food that you can offer them. I'm going to put the anemones in this enclosure because this one retains humidity a little bit better, and this particular species likes higher humidity. And the Greek shields need a little bit more airflow, so I'm going to put them in the more ventilated tank. Alright, so I'm going to spray down the moss before I add them. That way they can get nice and hydrated. But luckily, you can see that they were shipped in a container of moss, which is still damp. They weren't in the mail very long, just a couple days. so now that our isopod enclosures are set up and the new isopods are safely in their homes, we're going to talk about their diet. There's a number of things that you can feed your isopods. Like we discussed earlier, part of their main diet is going to be the leaf litter, so you want to make sure you have that in their enclosures at all times. However, there are some additional things that you can add to feed your isopods. For starters, you can give them small pieces of fresh fruits or vegetables. How much you give them is going to depend on how large the colony is. You don't want to add these additional things too often or leave them in the enclosure too long, because then you run the risk of attracting pests to the enclosure or growing mold, and that's not good for anyone. So I'd say only leave in enough for them to eat within the course of a day or two. If it's still in there after 2 days, remove it, and then you know for next time not to give such a large quantity. And here we have some zucchini and lettuce. They also are really fond of cucumbers. They'll eat pretty much any vegetable. Or a favorite amongst mine is the Pangea or even Rapaceate crested gecko powdered diet. If you've seen my other videos before, then you know that I breed crested geckos. I have a lot of crested gecko diet on hand in many different flavors. It comes in a powdered form, and you can just sprinkle the powder into the enclosure, but what I prefer to do is mix it with a little bit of water, just like you would if you were feeding it to your gecko. And you can put it in a shallow dish or even a water bottle cap and give it to your isopods to eat, and they really enjoy it. Isopods require a lot of calcium, which is nice because the gecko food has calcium and vitamins added into it already. Some people will also feed fish flakes to their isopods. That's not something that I've tried. I've heard other keepers say that that attracts gnats pretty fast if you do that. But if you keep species such as dairy cows that require a higher protein diet, you may need to supplement them with something like that, which is higher in protein. And just make sure you stay on top of it and remove anything that wasn't eaten in time so you don't attract those pests. Another thing you can do is Rapaceate has their own line of food specifically for isopods. And I've never tried feeding this before. I just bought this for the first time, so we're going to give it a shot today. You can feed this as a dry powder or a gel. All you have to do is bring water to a boil, pour the boiling water into a bowl, and mix 1 part powder with 2 to 3 parts water, and let it cool. And a supplement that you can add to their enclosure, since I was just saying how they really need lots of calcium, is the Cuddle Bone. You can find this at the pet store, you can find it at Walmart, you can get it online. As you can see, you'll most likely see it in the pet bird section. I'm going to break this up into small pieces and put it in the enclosures for my isopods. It's a natural source of calcium that they can go to and nibble on as needed. So let's try out that isopod food. First, we're going to bring water to a boil. And there's what the powder looks like. And keep in mind, guys, there's a lot of different things that isopods can eat. They kind of scavenge, so they're not too picky. But I'm just going over some of the main, easy, basic items that you can offer your isopods beyond just the leaf litter. So now you just mix it up and then let it cool to room temperature. And then I'll offer it to them tonight when they come out, and we'll see how they like it. Another favorite snack of isopods is the exoskeletons from mealworms. As mealworms grow, they will shed their exoskeletons, which will look like this empty casing here, and isopods love to eat these. Isopods will also eat dead mealworms, dead crickets, basically any kind of dead bug. That's why they're known as cleanup crews in bioactive terrariums for reptiles. They'll even eat reptile poop. Not that I'm suggesting you put that in there. But if you have your isopods living in a terrarium with a reptile, they will clean up the feces. And if you have reptiles and they shed their skin, isopods love to eat the leftover skin. Now, a lot of reptiles, like geckos for example, will eat their skin as it's coming off. So I don't interfere, I let them eat it. But if I happen to find any leftover pieces, I'll toss it in the bin with the isopods and they love it. Or for species such as chameleons that have skin that kind of flakes off of them when they shed, it's easy to find the bits and pieces of that to feed your isopods. Same with if you have snakes. I don't have snakes, but I've heard other isopod keepers say that theirs love to eat snake skin. Sorry for the bad lighting, but I didn't want to make it any brighter because I don't want to scare them off. But the anemones are trying out their new treat. So as you can probably see based off of the soil, I keep one half of the enclosure on the drier side, and then on the other half, I keep it more moist, so that way they can move back and forth as needed. If they're feeling like they need more moisture, they can move over here. If they need a break from it, they can go over to this side. And I keep their moss wet at all times, so that way if they need to go over and moisten up their gills, they can do so easily. Yes, isopods have gills. You can see they're taking shelter now because it's a little bit too bright for them, so I'm going to turn the lights back off. The anemone isopods have been very active and very fun to watch. I've been seeing them out and about more than my other species.